hello world. Welcome ka PaNZITan. I'm Michael Calizo, coming to you from Wellington, New Zealand. And welcome to our 8th episode of PaNZIT podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so that you'll get the updated episode when we upload our episodes, right? So today, Joseph and I is going to talk to Harish Pillay out of Singapore. Harish is the Red Hat Chief Technology Architect and one of the biggest names in open source in APAC.
Really?
Actually, I asked Harish to mentor me. So, we will give him the chance to introduce himself later, of course. And for now, hello, Joseph. Batiin mo naman ng mga viewers and listeners natin.
Yes, hello everyone, and good afternoon, whichever part of the world, or good day, whichever part of the world you are in right now. Mike, I'm actually excited about this topic. And to be honest, before I arrived to New Zealand, I pretty much dealt with proprietary software. And it is only in New Zealand that I learned about how open source can really help the world today. So I'm really excited about this and looking forward to our discussion with Harish.
All right, welcome, Harish. So how are you today? Tell us more about yourself, really. How's Singapore, by the way? Is it back to normal? New Zealand is back to normal since about 2-3 months ago.
Yeah. Well, Singapore is actually it's okay. I mean, we don't have a. Okay, let me wind back what I wanted to say. Things are very, very much under control.
Right.
So I just had my second jab yesterday, or day before yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah. So like my mother and my in-laws have gotten their two shots. My wife has got her first shot. I got my 2 shots, and my sons are going to get theirs soon. And so we are moving along in good pace. Our biggest challenge from a Singapore point of view is that because we are still a major transit air traffic transit and stuff like that, and so and we also have people coming back home, and that becomes a challenge. So people who come in will have to go into quarantine, and so that tends to keep the numbers up because of people with it, but they are not. They're all recovering over a period of time. So fortunately, we had even one is too much. We had 30 people who passed on in the last 1 year. So it's a small number, but still, it's a number that shouldn't be there in the first place.
But how's life in general out there, Harish? Are you able to go out for a stroll?
Oh yeah, no, that's no problem. Yeah, you can go anywhere you want, but there are certain restrictions, like number of people per event, for example, is 8, and then you can have public events up to 50. And I think like schools have been open all along, so only for a very short period was it closed for about a month or so. I think April, May last year. But schools have been open ever since. So schools have never been closed longer than that period.
Yeah,
right.
It's almost
So things are you can carry on most of the stuff, and like for example, I mean, there's certain restrictions were added, like restaurants and pubs and everything must close at 10:30 p.m.
That's not too bad.
That puts a bit of a it puts a damper on stuff, but that's how it has been. But then you have all the delivery services and all that are functioning on the trains, and the buses are just functioning. So by and large, it's been okay, except that the number of people that can be in one area was controlled. And we added a bunch of other technologies into the equation as well, for contact tracing and so on. And
that's right,
and one of the things I'm quite happy about is I helped them to open source it a year ago last week.
Wow.
Yeah. So at the government level, so we can talk about it later. But things are okay. I mean, are getting better now. So
it's really good to hear, Harish, because we've just opened our travel bubble with Australia. And when I was listening on the news, Singapore was one of the countries that they are trying to float to have another bubble. So we're really happy that you're in a better situation out there.
I think the idea is to use Singapore as a transit hub of everybody that wants to go to the country, including the visiting or the tourists, because New Zealand, as you know, is a tourist destination, and there's a lot of business that is affected right now.
That's right.
the Labor Party is trying to, the incumbent right now is trying to play it safe, while the National Party and the ACT is trying to tell them that, hey, we've been okay for the longest time. Please open the border. The business are suffering right now. So
it's a tough call. It's a tough call. I mean, it's things can go south very quickly.
Exactly.
But we have to all chip in to do our bit. I mean, it's the public spiritedness is extremely important. I think that's really what makes the difference.
Correct. It's pretty much on us, and Harish, Michael told us about that you're one of the big names when it comes to open source in APAC, and I'll be keen to hear more about who Harish Pillay is, and probably you can tell us about the things that you do. How did you get into open source, and we will also be interested on what do you do to relax outside of work. So we'll be happy to hear it from you yourself.
Sure, happy to. All right. Okay. Open source is something that, as a label, if you attended my NHO, you haven't attended my NHO sessions yet, the new higher orientation for those who are not from Red Hat. I do get a chance to speak, and one of the things that the word open source, or the two words open source, or the phrase open source, was not coined until 1998. So it's only 23 years old as a phrase, or as a set of words. But before that it still is. It's all free software.
Yeah.
So open source is a marketing term for free software. Okay, so I put it out there. So people who disagree with me, that's fine. But I have been involved in this kind of accidentally. It was not something that I went out of the way to figure, because when I was in graduate school in the United States, this is in the 1980s, the mid 80s. Yeah, so it's been a while. So 1986 is when I remember I went to Oregon State University to do my graduate degrees in electrical engineering. And so 1980s, okay, the internet is not there, right? So, and I had no idea about other things that was available. So it's a typical, disconnected mode. And I was doing electrical engineering, and we had the school was connected to something called ARPANET, the Advanced Research Projects Network. This is funded by the U.S. Department of Defense.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what that was. And so, and you remember, this is pre-web, no graphical user interface. I mean, there was a graphical user interface, but that is on the Sun workstations and the HP workstations. But that was it. There was this thing something called Windows or something like that. Not that I care about, but there was something like that. But important thing was I was part of, I was doing some stuff, and I came across this, a tape that was sent to the school. This tape contained emacs code. So it came because I was, as a student, you can, get hired to be like a teaching assistant or lab assistant or something like that. So I was looking after a bunch of systems and all that's kind of fun. And we received this tape, and the tape contained emacs, and it came from this thing called the Free Software Foundation. Okay. I have no idea who they are. This is 1986. So FSF was founded in 84. Yeah. So this tape arrived, and so I was speaking to the administrator there. I said, "So what do you do with this?" He said, "Well, I just load it up." Sure, I just put it onto the tape reader and load it up. So that's a source code for Emacs. Oh, okay, whatever that is, because I'm a VI guy. So, all right, fine. So whatever. And so what I had to do after extracting the code out of the tape was send the tape back. Yeah. So that they can be sent to somewhere else. So you pay for the postage back. So I did that. So I had at that point I still don't know really what this is all about. I mean, I was doing stuff, and the nascent ARPANET was there, and there were things like news groups. I don't know whether you know what news groups are. So it has been bought off by Google. So Google Groups. Right. All of the news groups. It's called Usenet, USENET.
This is the
very discussions. No, Freenode is it's IRC mostly, and IRC came a few years later. Yeah, it was not.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. I have a lot of history to tell you about, but you know,
it's really interesting to know.
There's a lot of history behind it, and so that's how I got. You know, so if the code is available, okay, big deal. So I can do what I want. Yeah, you can do what you want. And I never understood what it was. So until I had to work on my thesis for my master's thesis, I was building a TCP/IP stack for what was called OS2. OS2 is the IBM Microsoft product. It's an operating system similar to Windows, but it's called OS2, and it didn't have TCP/IP networking stack in it. And so my thesis was to build it using existing code that's already being built by Stanford University, and I think MIT also had something, but I used the Stanford one. And there was another guy in the ham radio community that also built something for the DOS environment. So combining the two together and trying to see whether I can do that on an OS2 environment. And the long story short is eventually I succeeded, not without help from this thing called the community that's on the user on Usenet. In the news group. So a lot of people, I don't know who they are, honestly. I've never met any one of them. But when I pose a question, someone gives me an answer. My professor had no idea what I was doing, which is fine. You know, you're pushing the boundaries of knowledge. So that's how I got involved in it, and still not knowing what it was until I came back to Singapore. Came back home in the 90s, and then I said, okay, there's this thing called something that's being done by this guy in Finland. And I was interested in the OpenBSD experiment being done at that point in time, in 1990, 1991. And but then there was a challenge with OpenBSD. The challenge was that it is out of the United States. And there were constraints that were, because it's coming from the US, in terms of cryptographic export, the strength of cryptographic algorithms. There was a restriction on the size of the key. It cannot be beyond 48 bits or something. There were those because cryptography. Because cryptography was deemed as a weapon, and it comes under Department of Justice and Department of Commerce that say you cannot export this. So I therefore was not too enthusiastic about OpenBSD effort. And there was this guy starting something in Finland. Hey, that's outside US jurisdiction, and though you can do whatever you want. And there you go. And so I therefore put my bets, as it were. Not that I was caring about bets, but that makes more sense to me. Let me work with that. And so I helped set up the Linux user group here in Singapore in 1993.
Wow.
And this was actually, it predates Red Hat's establishment as well in the US. So, and that's how I got involved in many small little ways all over the place. Because it solved my problem when I needed to graduate. If I didn't have access to all of those things, I wouldn't have graduated.
Absolutely.
So that's how I got started. It's a long story, but
it's really nice.
That's really, I think we need to create a history or a specific episode for that, for you to tell us that story, Harish. But
that's a lot to talk about.
It's a class.
I know. The history, those kind of things actually interest me a lot because, I think in some level, I love working with community. I love the innovation coming from open source. But that is absolutely a gold when you told us that story because, I can relate where you're coming from. But, but anyway, we need to move forward. So, the question that I actually wanted to ask is I know you've been with open source community. I know you've been with Red Hat for the longest time. So being a Red Hat's chief technology architect, what is the standard day in the office for you? If I may pick in your calendar, how does it look like?
It looks empty.
I like that.
Pretending, waiting.
No, because the nature of engagement with community is that there will be certain spurts of activity that happens.
Yes.
Because communities are like that. But when I joined Red Hat, I set up the Singapore office in 2003. So it was a one man show, right? It was, or maybe me and myself, so all three of us were running one thing in Singapore. And again, we were focusing on the sales and all this kinds of stuff. So I was doing everything from a sales, from marketing, from tech support to whatever needed to be done, right? And being the face in front of the media and all that. And also continue to engage with the open source community, whatever that would mean, right? But the important thing here is over a period of time, fortunately, and the way Red Hat is and how we do what we do, we added more people into the mix and more people came on board. And so I was able to then, hand off things to other people to do whatever, if it's sales related, let them do that, marketing, let them do that. They are best at that. And I will focus on the community side because that's our upstream. That's the upstream to everything Red Hat does. And we need to curate, we need to manage, we need to maintain that. So that's the kind of thing that I get busy about. I mean, even talking to you guys for this particular thing, this is an element of that. This is an element of that.
True.
There are many other things around the Asia Pacific as well, and that's part of the challenge I find, and in the excitement also, because people are saying, I want to be able to do this. Like a big good example would be last year this time, so maybe March last year, when Singapore introduced the contact tracing app for COVID. And I suggested to the minister who was in charge of it, would you be okay to open source the thing so that people can build trust in it, to know exactly what the heck this is doing and so on. And he agreed, and subsequently it was open source. And in that process of bringing it up, there was a lot of other countries that expressed interest in trying to participate. So now you're trying to get people to be excited about it and do whatever you want with it. Again, this was an opportunity to teach people because there was an expectation with people saying, "Oh, when you open source it, what does that mean? And if I take it, do I have to pay you? What does it mean?" Because a lot of them are doing it for the first time. They have no idea, right?
And I would like to continue on that, Harish. Because I myself doesn't know anything about open source before. I've worked with different flavors of Unix, all proprietary. But for those people like me 5 years, 6 years ago, can you tell us how open source works? How it prospers, based on what you already started telling us about.
I think prosperity is not probably the right word for that, right? It's not about
how it grows.
How it grows, and it grows as the term that typically is used is to scratch your own itch.
I like that.
If your nose is itching right now, I can't reach out to you and scratch it for you. You have to do it yourself, right? So that's exactly. So that's exactly what happens with open source. So people have problems to solve, whatever the problem may be. It could be something about a math function for your spreadsheet, whatever, right? And how are you going to solve it? Oh, I know how to do that because I'm good at that. Okay, you solved it for yourself, and now after that, what are you going to do? You want to keep it for yourself? Sure, go ahead and keep it for yourself. But what if I were to publish it so others can benefit from it? I don't know who. I don't care who. Whoever benefits from it. At least the work is not repeated. You don't reinvent the wheel for the sake of reinventing the wheel. By all means, reinvent the wheel if you think you've got a new idea for a better wheel, which is fine. But don't invent it don't reinvent it for the sake of because I don't have access to it. That's a bit silly. So open source allows you to put your best ideas out there or whatever ideas you have, and then others take it and do whatever they want with it, with no obligations of coming back to you. That's not the intent. So if I were to write something on in a book, and I published a book, the book is sitting in a library. When the book is sitting in a library, I as an author don't get any money out of it. But if it is sold by a bookstore, I might get 1 cent out of it from the publisher and whoever else, right? If it's in a library, I don't get, but people benefit from it. Okay. So if you step back and say the source code and open source community, why do people do what they do? Because I can do it, and I don't mind sharing it. I don't. Am I expecting anything back? Maybe, maybe not. But you don't have to. You're not forced to do so.
Of course.
You're not being forced to open it up. But you notice that once you open it up, it feels good. People come back to you and say, "Oh, thank you very much for doing that because I benefited from it." So things like that. So that's how you want to get going. It's a very slow snowball effect.
And I think it led, Mike, it led to a lot of breakthroughs in frustrations because of that. How it like snowballed and whatnot. Just like how they're trying to explain it on the tracing app. So that sounds really great.
Yeah.
So you touched something there that I think, people that might be listening to us is not familiar of what open source is and what is open source community, what is upstream communities. Can you explain it in a layman's term? I think it's better coming from you because
Sure, I'm more than happy to, and I do that all the time. So it's pretty much up my alley. I've gone through this iteration many times. So if you were to, I think one easy way to think about this is if you look at a river. A river, the water that is flowing in the river, where does that water come from? There is a source somewhere, the source of the river. In very long rivers that are in the New Zealand, for example, the source is most likely in some mountain somewhere, and when it rains or when it is snow or whatever it might be, over a period of time it just percolates through the rocks, and that is the source of the river. And the water flows down all the way. As the water flows down, people use the water for many things. They may bottle it, they may use it to, you name it. Any use case is fine. Now, could you just go to the source and take the water? Sure. You can do that if you want to do it. No one is stopping you from doing it, right?
Yes.
Or you can go and say, you know what, I like the guy who's bottling the water and I'm going to pay X dollars for the guy to do the work for me to take it from and take it from. Now, so if you look at source code and upstream and downstream, so the upstream is where the water, the head of the water of the river, it starts from there. That is therefore called upstream. So if you apply that same principle, upstream and downstream, from a river perspective, then if you step back and say, okay, if I consume the open source code and I use it, that is downstream. It came from somewhere. It could have come from another person or company or a project or whatever. Now, if I fix something, I improve something, can I feed it back up? Because when you feed it back up upstream, others will benefit as well, and you have no idea who the others are.
Yes,
you have no idea who, right? You are benefiting from it. You fix it. So I give you a simple case in point. Many years ago, the U.S. Department of Navy were deploying their rocket systems on the ships. Okay, they are the missile launchers and all that. They needed, by the way, they're all running Linux anyway, right? So they needed to have a real-time response when they press a button to launch the rocket or launch the missile. They needed something called real-time response. So that means a guaranteed sub-microsecond response time. Now, the standard Linux kernel, the ones that you and I are running on our machines, are not necessarily real-time to that extent. They are real-time, but not to that extent. They needed very much more precise timing. So great. So what they then approached they had, I said, can you do this? They said, well, we can do it. So IBM was one of their partners, and I think Raytheon or somebody else also was working on all of this. So together we added additional functionality to the Linux kernel. So that now when they press a button, they can launch immediately, right? Now, once you put that in there, in the Linux kernel, guess what? It goes back upstream to linux.com. I mean, at the top level, right? The kernel.org, right?
The kernel,
And guess what happened? That then came back down to production versions of the Linux kernel that were running in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Okay, so guess what? When the Mercantile Exchange people were press the button to sell something, it was happening sooner than they thought because it was real time. And so it's like, wow, suddenly became better. Now, did they ask for it? No. It's because of innovation that happened in one area, it goes back upstream and it gets benefiting everybody else. And that's how we are collectively raising the bar for everyone. Whether it benefits us as a business is a secondary question. But the primary benefit is the community. And when the community benefits, everybody benefits along the way.
That's right.
So it's a win-win for everybody. It's not I win, you lose kind of scenario.
Correct.
Yeah. And I would like to have a follow-up question on that, actually, Harish, because you touched a very important thing there, by contributing to community. So how can a person actually get involved in an open source community? And what do you think is the benefits of of the person or an individual joining communities, just like you and me.
Yeah, I think the best answer here would be you do what you think is you're most comfortable with.
Okay.
Okay, is whatever comes with your skill sets, whatever comes with your interests, whatever comes with your situation where you are. So you could be, for example, contributing documentation. So, for example, you may be using an application and you're trying to figure it out, and then you read the documentation. The documentation is quite bad. Why didn't you improve the documentation by the lessons you learned in using it?
Correct.
That's a form of contribution.
Yeah.
That's how everybody moves on. And open source is not about source code only. It's about the whole range of things. Your documentation. I don't like the icon. Go fix the icon. Improve the icon. Do something else. Or I don't like the font. Build a new font.
Right.
I don't like the way the particular layout of the application is. Well, propose a change it for yourself, and then propose it upstream. So once you get into that, then these are areas that I can. So pick the area that you feel most comfortable with, and then move along that way. That's the best way to do it. There's no other way to do this.
That's really a very good piece of advice, Harish. And I think there's also a lot of communities nowadays and projects as well, open source projects. So based on how many decades of experience that you have, how did the overall rate of increase in open source adoption in the tech industry has grown? And do you think there's been a paradigm shift when it comes to open source and proprietary software overall?
I think, definitely the paradigm has changed. The difference, there is an underlying reason why the change happened. The change happened because of a fundamental change in infrastructure. And that infrastructure is called the internet.
Right.
Okay. If we do not have the internet the way we have today, if we don't have broadband, for example, maybe not even broadband, you go to slower speeds, dial-up modems, the stuff in the 1990s, right? I don't know whether you remember dial-up modems, right?
I still remember the sounds.
Yeah, exactly. So you can cue the sound in for this when you do the post edits, right? And so because I can communicate with anybody in the world, okay, I can communicate anybody in the world. The internet allows me to do all those interesting things. Without that, I cannot share. And because I have that, I can share. And slowly, it just have a snowball effect. It just moves up. And you find that the guys who were hoarding their own stuff, the proprietary vendors, for example, suddenly finding that, it's hard for us to keep everything to ourselves. Because people now can just copy the stuff that they built and make it available. They break the keys or whatever, which is wasted effort on people's part. But okay, whatever, you want to do that, that's fine. And you find that this is a losing battle for them. And so they are now increasingly adopting open source collaboration. Now, we do have a kink on the road right now because a lot of those proprietary vendors have moved to the cloud, which doesn't make it any better. Okay, it is still a lock-in to the cloud vendor. So we need to extricate that out because you as a user should benefit from it. But never mind, it's one step at a time. At least now they move to a different realm, right? So that's how this thing happened because of the underlying internet access that everybody has. So I don't care which part of the world you are in, you have internet access, you can be a contributor.
Everyone is able to collaborate wherever whichever part of the world you are.
Key. That's right. You could be in Timbuktu. I don't care which part of the world you are in.
Hey, it's a nice place to be, man.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it is. I haven't been there, but I would love to go there.
Me too. I've seen a lot of photos. But anyway, so you've touched a little bit about the the innovation and because of the collaboration and the open source, and you also touched about the lock-in, which basically the new lock-in right now, which is the public cloud. So what do you think are the advantages of having open source as a platform for our listeners to get into? And also, let's talk about the concern of open source. I mean, open source, I think the thinking of insecure open source code is still there amongst other, but I think that's one of the still existing, I would say, conversation that's happening. How do you handle this, and what is your perspective on that?
Okay, very simple. It's a myth that it is insecure. But I think an example that we can cite for proprietary software being absolutely insecure is what happened with SolarWinds.
That's right.
The security company having their own systems being compromised for months on end and not knowing that it was compromised and blah, blah, blah. And it's a proprietary software vendor. So therefore, any CIO who asks me that question, I would say, are you a customer of SolarWinds? Do you trust them now? I mean, I know they have a good product, but hey, it's a proprietary product. And yet you see what happened. On the other hand, have we had any open source products being compromised? Have we had any open source solutions being compromised? Sure, there has been. However, we can fix it. May not be the original creator, people can fix it. We can come together and fix it. And we have it. Even Red Hat had issues over the years. We fix it. We fix it very quickly because our customers are immediately exposed to it. We have to fix it. So the onus is on us and the greater open source community to come together and fix the issue, as opposed to a vendor that says, "Oh, you know what? I will probably not talk about it. I will hide it, and then let's hide it." Right? There's an existing one ongoing right now. It's called QNAP. This is a network attached storage provider. They have their system has been compromised for the last maybe 5 months. They have been informed since like October or November or September, October last year. Even as of last week, they have not acted on it. The guys who informed them, there's a 3-month kind of like a grace period when I inform you as part of good practices for you as a vendor to go fix it, or at least engage with whoever reported this. Say, we're working on it. Please, we'll fix it. They have not responded. They just left it. But the guys who found this issue, they are not publishing what the issue is. They're giving broad hints as to why there is a problem, because it's going to hit about 85 million systems or some large number like that. Okay, this is network attached storage. So this is proprietary all the way through.
What's in there? Oh, you can just imagine what's in there.
Exactly. That's exactly. Exactly. So security is not an issue. I mean, it's very easy to talk through in today's context. In fact, for a long time already, it's not an issue at all.
So you touched that as the really good example and explanation about the security. How about the advantages of, you touched already the advantages of having an open source, but as an enterprise, what do you think is the key advantages of having open source technology?
I think this is part of this is actually a conversation that typically does not happen at an enterprise. Why do I need open source for the services? Because my business is doing whatever my business needs to do. It is a conversation, because I can tell you, from a Red Hat perspective, right? Our customers don't really care whether it's open source product or not. They don't care. They just want to say, hey, get the job done and make sure it's working and it doesn't fail. How you do it, they don't care. But what happens is, over the years, this is my 18th year at Red Hat, right? Over the years, we have come across customers who didn't get it at the first instance. And then when something happened, then we get to show them, you see, because the code is open, we can get the fix done in quick enough that solves the problem. And not only are you protected, others are protected as well. You compare that kind of stuff. Instead of comparing, just say, look, others have other challenges trying to get this thing done. We have to do it because you're already exposed. The code is there. We get to fix this, and we fix it, and we get it done. So, Red Hat used to publish what's it called, a security report or something like that on an annual basis or something. And
security report.
something like that. And we stopped doing it because it was meaningless. Because this is being published by CERT, the Computer Emergency Response Team, CERT. They publish it, and almost always you can see severity 2 and 3 issues from a Red Hat point of view. We get it solved in 24 hours. Severity 1 within the next 24 hours.
Yep.
So about 100% of severity 1 is solved within 48 hours.
That was quick, eh? Yeah.
Wow, that's quick. Yeah.
And this is not us saying,
power,
right? Yeah, and this is not us saying it. This is CERT saying it, right?
Yeah.
And if something is exposed, we can't hide it. We cannot hide it. Like I don't know whether you remember 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago, or maybe slightly more than that? The issue with the CPU, Intel CPUs, the side channel attacks, the side channel attacks.
I can't remember the name. They have a fancy name.
Yeah, exactly. The interesting thing there was the initial response. Not every vendor was notified by Intel.
Yep.
And we were notified, Red Hat was notified, and some others were notified, but then we couldn't talk about it to other people. So in the meantime, the Linux kernel guys were working to get the thing fixed in the kernel itself.
I remember that.
For a hardware problem.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Using open source technology to fix a hardware problem. Great.
Exactly.
Amazing.
These are very powerful conversations.
It is very powerful.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think.
And on top of that, I think the power of innovation, because there will be more people contributing to to think about the better solution on the problem is always amazing. If you ask me.
Yeah. I just mentioned very quickly when I worked on my thesis in 1988 or so, I was trying to build a TCP/IP stack for OS2. OS2 is not open source, so they had an API you can access. So I had to figure out, okay, with that limited API to the OS itself, I had to build a TCP/IP stack, which is open source on its own, to then talk to this, try and figure out to get data from the network packet, a network layer, and then pump it into the OS to send it to back to the network and blah blah blah. And so I had to reverse engineer that way to put TCP/IP on it. So there are many challenges that can be solved. You want to innovate something, open it up so that people can add to it. People add to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, Harish, I really appreciate all the wisdom, all the thoughts, all the learnings, especially the history behind how you learned open source. I think it's like really almost listening to Command Line Heroes, one of the Red Hat podcasts.
Exactly.
I think that's worthy of an episode out there. But just to wrap things out, we'd really like to hear your last few nuggets of wisdom for all those IT professionals out there listening who wanted to learn more about open source and practically career in general. Just last few pieces of advice from you would be great.
Sure. I think the IT practitioners around the world, I mean, what you have to do is never shortchange yourself by saying, I don't know this, I don't know that. Okay, there was once upon a time that may have been difficult to go figure it out because it was not available, it was not open source. With open source stuff, there's nothing stopping you try to figure out how to do things. You can install the thing on your own computers. You can get a virtual machine somewhere in the cloud. Why are you shortchanging yourself? I have this conversation very, very often with a lot of people who have been in the IT industry for 20 years.
Right.
And they say, my organization is going to be, I'm going to get redundant, I'm going to get this. Why? Haven't you learned anything? No, because I'm very familiar with that. Well, then get out of the business, get out of this industry. Don't complain. Because the thing is there in front of you. Don't use it, learn from it. Never shortchange yourself. That's the bottom line. Never shortchange yourself. People tend to do that. Sometimes it's the easier way out. But don't do that. Don't shortchange yourself.
Well, you've heard it straight from the legend, Harish Pillay himself. Never shortchange yourself. Technology is out there in front of you. Open source is out there in front of you. Make them.
I like it.
And on that note, I would like to thank Harish Pillay. Thank you for your time. We know you're a very busy man, but thank you for taking the effort to be with us, Mike.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, gentlemen, for the opportunity to chat.
And again,
awesome. Thanks.
Thank you to all our listeners. I'm sure you'll love this episode. So give us that like, share, and subscribe. And also share it just like an open source software. Share the knowledge there.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Again, thanks for your time,
Exactly.
guys. And everyone,
Thanks.
have a good day. Be
Cheers.
safe. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye.